Welcome to Behind the Scenes at ID8 Studios, the place where we explore the art of producing art. I'm Steve Sue with Crystal Baki and our good friend John LeBlanc, digital plumber extraordinaire. Yeah, so John is going to speak today a little bit on how to build your first website.
Sure, let's do it.
What is a website?
What is a website? Well, it's your globally accessible 24/7 window and storefront to the world.
Right, so it's like the old school brochure and your business card. But one thing that I like about websites is they're living, they're alive. We can change them very easily. Because I remember when we would do brochures, holy cow, you get one typo, you're jacked up, right? So, oh no, do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Or all those software companies that used to put out their releases on CD-ROM. Right? You gotta get the software right. You gotta get it committed to a disk. You gotta make sure it's solid as heck, and then you have to box it, and then you have to ship it and store it, and the expense.
Case. Yeah.
It's really flexible situation that we have now that
for sure
that allows anybody to jump in the game and do whatever they want for practically nothing.
Including you, Crystal. You can have your own website too.
Yeah, I know nothing about making a website, so this is really interesting.
So for the newbie, like you're an artist,
yes,
Crystal, right? You might want a website for your new band or just yourself as a personality. You might want to sell something out of your kitchen table, like you're the Etsy kind of girl, but you don't want to do it on Etsy. You want your own site. Mm-hmm. So what do you do, John, to get started?
Well, get started, you have to have a name, right?
Okay.
Just like nobody can call you until you have a phone number. So, I mean, step one is find your domain name, and there's a little bit of an art in that as well because, well, a lot of the good ones are taken. You can't just be crystal.com. And maybe you wouldn't want to anyway, right? Because if you choose crystal.com, how do you spell it? You get a couple of options.
Right, yeah.
So that's a big gotcha for people too, is they already have an existing brand or an existing name, and either it's so common that other people have it, or there's so many homonyms that people are uncertain
big word,
how to
Crystal.
get there.
Yeah.
You know that word?
No.
Words
I don't know that word
words that
either.
sound the same. Like the number two, right? It could be two or the number
Right.
two, TWO, TOO. So you
John
never
just took us back to like third grade and
Yeah.
like, oh, what?
But I mean, it's important because if I'm say I'm on a podcast someday and they ask me how do people find you, and I say, oh well, I'm at Web2. Is it WEBTOO
Oh, yeah.
or TWO or
yeah,
the
that
number
could be
two?
numeral.
confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
some extra things that you want to think about just in terms of practicality. Brevity is another important ingredient. You want to have something that's really short.
Yeah, that word,
because-
Crystal?
No.
Short. It means
Shortness.
short.
Yeah.
Short.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I was gonna ask like, what's more successful, a longer name or like a shorter name?
Well, I mean, shorter and concise and as few homonyms as possible is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
I know
if
that word
your
now.
if your
Yes, I
if
do.
your
I'm
if your
in.
domain is anti-disestablishmentarianism.com,
Whoa.
then you don't want to, because you're going to be using it for your website and probably for your email as well. So if
Yeah.
you'd be like, yeah, just email me at crystal@anti-disestablishmentarianism.com, every single character is an opportunity for a typo. So it just ends up being more humbug.
Okay.
So you're thinking about stuff like that. What is easy to relay verbally, and what's the shortest possible thing that's available? And if you want a .com, then you have fewer choices in that space because all the .coms, domain names are real estate for a lot of people, and people will just buy short, concise .com domain names just for resale. So a lot of those things that aren't even being used have been bought up. At least now we live in a time where we have other top-level domains that people can use. Before, it used to just be like com, net, org, and then there was like mil and gov that were and edu that were reserved for institutions that qualified. But now there's so many of these top-level domains that we can use. .us still has a lot of good short names available. There's .biz and .co and all the country extensions too. .es, .be. So and people are a little more comfortable with that. I think in the 90s, if you didn't have a .com or .net or .org, people would be confused.
So I want to fast forward you, John, because this is good information, but we got a lot of area to cover because we want to launch a website.
Oh, okay, great.
So where do you go to get? Do you buy a URL, for example?
Sure. Well, a domain name is a lot like your phone number, where you go to a company that is a registrar that has this pool of names or numbers. And so there's lots of different registrars available.
Give us an example of those registrars.
Sure. So GoDaddy is a really popular one, and they provide other services too. But I strictly would use them for for domain name registration. An old one was, Network Solutions was one of the early ones that we all used in the 90s when we were first doing stuff. There's, Google has their own domain name registrar, so Google Domains. If you already have a Google account, which a lot of people do, that gives you an easy way to not have to create another ID that you have to.
So you buy your
Pay
name,
attention to.
Crystal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Crystalisboss.com.
Yep.
And then what?
And then, okay, so you got your domain name, so now you gotta point it at something. So you'll need some sort of web hosting. So your domain name it's like your phone number, and like your phone number, you can choose a different cell phone provider and point your phone number at that provider. So same thing with your website. Once you have your domain name, you can point it at whatever web host you like. And so your web hosting comes down to really what is it that you want to do with your site. For some people, they will just redirect to something else that they already have. Like a lot of people will have those link in bio pages that just is like a list of links, which is really kind of the easiest way to get started. You're not even really building a site, you're just using a service that points people to all the things that you're doing, and you can very easily update. Here's my Instagram, here is my Shopify where I'm selling stuff, here is my Flickr account where I put all of my photos, and here's a link to my email so you can email me, or a link to some sort of contact form. So that'd be the easiest way, where you're not even really building a site, you're just using a free service and pointing your domain name at it. Or you can get web hosting. And a lot of people first thing they'll do is they'll say, okay, what's the fastest way for me to get a site up? And they'll go with a web hosting service that has a plug and play builder, like a Squarespace or a Wix or a Weebly. And those are very attractive to people because it doesn't require any technical skill to be able to get something up and running, and it's pretty. The downside with those is that they're not very functional and they're not very sustainable. So once you put your content in there, you can't really export it. That's not what their businesses are built for. They're just built for you to put your content in there and then pay them their monthly fee forever.
What about Shopify?
Shopify is a commerce platform that's really popular, and that gives people a way to very easily sell things and configure categories of things that they want to do. And it integrates with other systems too. So if you're selling stuff online, but you're also selling stuff at a craft fair, that you can integrate that so that you have an iPad or whatever for people to check out. That can be a good starting point for a lot of people.
But you see it as a starting point for e-commerce, or is it an endpoint for, because my understanding is that Shopify is better for smaller businesses that are kind of starting out, but when you get bigger, you might want to go to some other platform, in part because of the pricing models. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us a bit? I think probably a lot of people that might listen to this would be thinking, how do I sell my stuff online?
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's, Shopify isn't the only game in town that provides you a commerce platform. It's over time, you can see that there's cost benefits to sort of choosing other tools, because you're going to pay per transaction or per month for any of these commerce solutions that, what you're paying for is the convenience of getting up and running and fast. So for some people, that's worth it. But when you start doing volume, you're like, well, maybe I don't want to necessarily pay a percentage on top of my credit card percentage that I'm paying per transaction, because it can add up.
Yeah.
So for some people it's a good way to get started. I think the main thing that I would want to impart to people is, if you're choosing a platform, find a platform that allows you to get the information back out as easily as getting it in there, because that ends up being the trap. Is all these all these companies that are software as a service, their business model is kind of holding you hostage. So it's important to pick things that will allow you to get out as easily as you can get in, so that as your business changes and evolves, or you want to save money, you have the flexibility to do so.
And what do you normally put people into? Because you build sites for clients.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit unique in that I've been doing it for a long time, but sometime in the early 2000s, when I was building content management systems from scratch, there was a new blogging platform out that was called WordPress that was doing a lot of the things that I was doing in my custom builds even better than I was doing it. And part of that was due to the fact that this was an open source platform, meaning that it was citizen built and citizen managed. And so there was tons of people, because it's a free open source product, that wanted to contribute to it and make it better for their own purposes. It wasn't stuck behind a business model. It didn't, it's open. So I looked at this thing and thought, wow, I could save myself a lot of time by not reinventing the wheel and not doing everything from scratch. I can leverage the wisdom of crowds and leverage the expertise of this huge, diverse developer pool to to use this platform. And so at the time, it was just a blogging platform. And all it did was it kept all of your information in a database. It allowed you to control manipulate some templates, and then it would take the database content and stick it with the templates all in one request. So you had the ability to have a dynamic site that by changing a template, you can change the whole look of the website globally. So it was a very flexible tool, and here we are like 15 years later.
It's about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And
that was
actually,
15 minutes.
full disclosure, I was with John at South by Southwest 15 years ago, and John drags me to a party that Matt Mullenweg was at, the founder of WordPress. And John, I remember at the time, was like, we got to get on one of these platforms and use them because they're all coming up, and we didn't know which one to go on. And so he had this feeling in his bones that WordPress was really going to become this gigantic leader in this space. And I was like, okay, I trust you because this is the guy that built websites from scratch for like CBS in San Francisco.
It was agonizing.
And in Boston. And, yeah. But I mean, you were like complete like HTML king. You were the jockey. And I always tell people, John is the very best WordPress guy this side of the Mississippi, if not the whole United States.
I don't know about that.
He's shy and you know, hat in hand. But you were right. I mean, and I remember it was an agonizing decision to really get on that platform.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's not for everybody, but to me, I like it because it's constantly evolving and getting better, and there's whatever it is that you want to do on it, there's some component that you can find somewhere. A lot of them are free. A lot of them are open source software. So if you have a site and you want to do a photo gallery, there's tons of options. If you want to integrate your Instagram feed, there's tons of options. If you want to integrate products from your Shopify store, you can. Or you could even open your own store using WooCommerce, which is the free commerce plugin for WordPress. And then all of a sudden, when you have the commerce plugin, now you have a way for customers to log in and look at their order history and to save their payment methods and do all these things. So that's what I like because I'm very conversant in it.
It's a very extendable and future-proof platform. I think that's one of the
WordPress?
reasons why. Yeah. And what percentage of information sites are done on WordPress these days?
I don't know the
It's
specific
gargantuan,
number.
right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Gargantuan.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that whatever web hosting platform you go to, because you need to buy space on a server that's available on the internet 24/7 to host your site, they're going to have either they're specialized specifically to run those sites, or they'll have a one-click installer for you to get the thing up and running. So I like that, and it requires some maintenance if you do it yourself. You can also just go to WordPress.com and they'll handle all the maintenance for you. You're a little bit more limited in what components you can add, but for most people it's fine. And it gives you a way if you decide that, like, hey, there's another platform that's better for me someday, and who can see the future? This could become very dated real fast as quantum computing comes out and there's some new platform that is all things to all people. At least you can get your product inventory out. You can get your list of URLs that you've published and replicate them somewhere else. So for now, I like it, and it gives me the flexibility to allow people to be in control, because the last thing you want to have in between you and your customers is some sort of like technical barrier. And most of the people that I work with, I don't want them to even have to know how to spell HTML to publish. I want them to be able to get their products online, get their art online, to be able to do what they want to do because they've got the vision, not because they have the technical expertise. So that's another reason why I like it, is it doesn't require any special software. You just log in on a web-based platform and you add your material, whether that's products or events or articles or even managing user-generated content, building forums or allowing guest posts.
One thing I've noticed about publish on the internet, particularly for early like newbies, is they start really simple, and like a year later, they've got all these fancy things they want to do. And so the area of plugins is what you're kind of been referring to. Can you explain what a plugin is and how does that work?
Sure.
For the WordPress?
Well, first off, I'd want to sort of step back and say, whenever I'm approaching an application or a website, I think about it in three different categories: the what it says, the what it does, and the what it looks like. Because those are three separate silos that, well, they're not really silos because they work together, but it's just a way to sort of focus in what you're doing, because there's a certain level of usability that you need for it to be functional, and then there's the actual content, what it is that you're trying to sell or convey, and then there's the the functionality. So a plugin is the what it does portion of that holy trinity, as I think of them. And a plugin would give you the ability to add a homepage featured video slider, or it would give you a way to sell things, have the concept of a product in an order, or would give you a special post type like a testimonial, so that you have exactly the fields that you need to fill them out.
Or the pop-up thing, join our email list.
Yep. The pop-ups, that's it.
Events calendar, booking engines.
Booking engines, yep.
Got it, Crystal?
Yeah.
Because you want people to be buying your tickets and stuff and showing up to your concerts.
Absolutely.
Okay, so refresh for Crystal. What does she need to do to start a website? She needs to...
Well, you need a domain name.
Domain name.
Right? That's your.
And do you know where you go to get that, Crystal?
Yes. Did you say GoDaddy?
That's one. Yep.
You win.
Woo! Yeah.
A so far.
Yeah.
And then a URL.
Yep. So once you have your domain name in short,
Yeah, short.
and hard to confuse, right?
Yeah.
You don't something that has a lot of different variations that sound the same. Then find your web host.
Yeah.
Do you know that there's a website called penisland.net?
No.
And it means something else if you think about how that's spelled. It's
Penn Island. No.
Penn Island.
What about it?
Penis
Yeah. That's another
Penis
thing you have to
land,
watch out for. Is sometimes when you take two words together, sometimes the words combined can be problematic.
Yeah.
They're called bad camels. Because camel casing is where you put two words together. So it's like the first letter of each word is capitalized.
Yeah.
So you could capitalize it differently and it spells something else.
Yeah. Problem with domain names is they're case insensitive, so you
Yeah.
can't do that for domain
Yeah.
names. So yeah, good point, Steve. Be careful
that's a
that
good point.
there aren't nefarious contexts that people can.
So you get your URL at GoDaddy, and then
Yeah.
what do you do?
And then find web hosting. So if in my case, because I specialize in WordPress, I always find a WordPress specific host, and I pay a little bit more so that I don't have to waste a lot of time, configuring the server to work properly. So I like WP Engine is a good one, Flywheel is a good one, Kinsta is a good one, Pagely is a good one. That's just for WordPress stuff. That's the stuff that I
Can
pay
you tell that
attention to.
Crystal is cross-eyed right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what if she can't figure out web hosting on her own? What does she do?
Well, then she can call Steve Sue, and then he'll point her in the right direction.
Okay.
I know people.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely,
I
I'll
got you
call
covered.
you.
I got
Yeah.
you covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but there's people that specialize in creating websites, getting hosting for you, and so I'm just trying to shortcut this to say that you don't have to do all the technical stuff, because John had said that before. There's lots of people that will help you.
Yeah.
I think you probably want to be like, I know what pages I want. I know what I want the pages to say. You could go on Google Docs and just start writing all the content for your pages.
For sure.
And then that's a really good way to hire somebody, because then they know the scope of the work
Yeah.
that you're asking them to do.
Okay,
And
I
I would
can do
even
that.
start sooner than that, Steve. And rather than building out a ton of pages, like maybe just start today and just have a contact form or have a mailing list subscription form. Like you don't have to treat it like you're publishing a vinyl record or a bound book. You can start little, and in fact, I prefer that people just start
One-pagers.
small. Yeah, because
One-page website.
Because then as you're adding the new thing, you're really focused on that new thing that you're adding, rather than trying to do it all at
Yeah.
once and have things slip through the cracks.
I have one question. What is the minimal amount of money that you would have to spend to have a website up?
$0.
Really? But I thought you had to buy like space for the server.
You can, but a lot of times there's services that you can use for free where you just end up using a subdomain of theirs. So like, for instance, WordPress, because I'm most familiar with it, there's WordPress.com. And so if I wanted to have my own website at crystalbacky.wordpress.com, I could. You don't own the domain.
Gotcha.
Because it's a subdomain of somebody else's.
I
And
see.
that's maybe not sustainable over time because you really want to own
Your
your
own,
name
right,
and you want
right.
it to be short. But,
Okay.
but it's a way for you to get started for free. And with that, they would give you a builder that allows you to pick a theme and publish pages and posts and upload media, and you could get started that way for free. And then eventually, if you're like, hey, this is working really well, now I want my own domain, you can add a domain to that for whatever it is, $10 a year or
12
something.
bucks a year.
Yeah. And
Okay.
now you have that same website, but branded with your own name, and then that might be fine for a while, and then eventually, if you get to a point where you're like, hey, I need to do more customization than this limited framework will allow me, then you could take that entire site, move it onto your own hosting for a monthly fee. And, budget hosting you can get for $10 a month or maybe even less. But, professional hosting, you probably want to pay a little bit more and get backups and get support and get security, and you can get enough storage to be
Fast
sustainable.
speed, service speed, all those kind of things. Yeah, but
Wow.
actually, so you can think about it in terms of I can go zero, I can go $12 a year, I can go maybe like, a couple $100 a year to do a little bit of service by somebody. I think probably a lot of John's clients in the information space that are doing like company websites, they might do like a couple $1,000 for a website, maybe $1,000. It's not, even if you want the full-on pro site nowadays, they're not very expensive by business numbers. Like, if you were starting a business and you're going to go rent an office somewhere, what are you going to spend a month?
Yeah.
So that's the thing that always is so mysterious to me about websites is like people like, it costs too much. It's like, $20 a month for a hosting. Are you kidding me? It's like, wait a minute, time out. What is your rent?
Yeah.
I can get my nephew to build this website. John, what's your famous word on that?
Go
Please
do
invite
that.
them.
Go do that. I'll talk to you in 2 months.
Yeah. Invariably, right? Yeah. And by then, John's too busy. So,
And I think there's so much knowledge out there that there's a lot that you can do yourself. Some people don't want to spend the time doing it, but it's been interesting teaching certain clients how to control their own destiny. Because that's my whole thing, is that like I don't want to be stuck in the middle. I don't want to be your bottleneck. I just want to teach you how to do it so that you can be empowered. And I think that's important for artists because sometimes they either don't have the cash or they're creative people and they want to learn new skills. So it can be fun, but it's always satisfying when I teach, I do a lot of mentoring, like a lot of one-on-one teaching, and I give somebody a tool set, and it's fun whenever I like look away for a little while and all of a sudden they've taken that and run with it. Yeah. There's been a couple people that have started their own web development agencies as a result of the realization that like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be a coder stuck in a dark basement, debugging code in order to build.
That's cool.
I
I'm really
be a
inspired.
Storyteller for the website.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's really cool. I'm actually really inspired. I think I'll make a website at home.
Okay,
You
so
should.
Crystal, you're up. John, thank you for all the wisdom.
Thank
Sure.
you so
and
much.
Can Crystal tap you from time to
Of
time?
course. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, and where can she tap you at?
She can
And
tap.
Where can they tap you?
Yeah.
at?
Yeah. Well, you can reach me at johnleblanc.com, and you'll find everything that you need to know about me there. Be responsible, people.
Yeah, play nicely. For more on BTS at ID8, visit id8studios.org. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.